Good afternoon, everybody. It's Friday again, weekend. You're going to probably watch this on Saturday by the time I upload it. But I want to finish the account of Genesis today, and I'm going to skip over a few things just to get to Joseph, because I want to complete this study on Genesis today, if I can. So we left off with Jacob and his transformation, wrestling with God, and we see that his wife Rachel, having given birth to first Joseph and then Benjamin, dies. And interestingly, the memorial for her is the oldest one for a woman in the whole Bible. It's still there today in Israel, Rachel's tomb. So Jacob and the sons now, the 12 sons, are living with him in Canaan, and there is a famine about to occur. Joseph, being the prime minister, we see him as a type of Christ. What happened is the sons of Jacob sold him into slavery to their relatives, the Ishmaelites, because they were jealous of him and they hated him. Joseph was a dreamer. He kind of naively gives some dreams of the sheaves, which represent all the brothers, bowing down to his sheaf, and even the moon and the stars and the sun, which represents Jacob, probably Leah, and again the brothers bowing down to him. So there's animosity there. Plus, Jacob gives preferential treatment to Joseph by giving him what we call the coat of many colors. So at one point, Jacob says, go down and see how your brothers are doing. They're out, taking care of the sheep and whatnot. Joseph goes out innocently, not knowing what's going to happen. They take him and they throw him into a pit, and some Ishmaelites come along in a caravan heading to Egypt, and they say, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. And that's what they do. To cover their tracks, they take an animal, they kill it, put the blood of the animal on the coat, bring it back to Jacob, and say, is this your son's tunic? Jacob is totally dismayed. I've lost my son. A wild beast has eaten him. Interestingly, they deceive the deceiver. But Jacob's had a transformation. Now he's in mourning, and he, is just, he can't be consoled. And, a lot of bad things are happening here among the family. Eventually, Joseph is taken by the Ishmaelites, brought into Egypt, and he's thrown into a prison there, but it's kind of like house arrest. He's a slave. He helps, he serves. Interestingly, he does not in any way sin against God. He doesn't blame his circumstances. He keeps his heart right. And the thing with Joseph is he knows there's a destiny on his life. These dreams, it looked like, he was going to be restored in some kind of an authority position. He may not have known everything that was going to take place. However, he goes through the death of a vision, and he learns to serve. He doesn't sin against God. He is not embittered by bad circumstances. He felt there was a divine destiny on his life, and he had to keep his life clean and pure. Bitterness is a poison to the soul, as it says in Hebrews chapter 12. So he's in this situation. He resists the temptation of Potiphar's wife. Because of that, she concocts a plan that he raped her or tried to. He's thrown even further into a dungeon. What's happening here? All these things are tests. And I heard a man of God say years ago, unless a man learns to rule over his flesh, he is not qualified to be a leader. I like that. A lot of times, that's why we undergo supreme tests and trials. God is purging us of flesh, carnality, worldliness, in order to elevate us into a position of authority, possibly power. And this is what happens to Joseph. So he keeps his life clean, and even the dreams, he holds on to the dreams. In prison, in this dungeon, he meets up with, I think it's a cupbearer and a baker, and they both have dreams. and they want Joseph to interpret the dreams. Maybe he mentioned that, he was able to do that. One of them gets out of prison according to the dream. The other one is executed for probably a plot against the Pharaoh. That tells me dreams can be a real key to your fate. Hold on to them. Don't disregard them. Don't think, they're not significant. They can be. And eventually, the Pharaoh has a couple of dreams, and one of them is about 7 gaunt cows that get eaten up by, actually the 7 gaunt cows eating up these lively cows, and then the 7 ears of corn. They bring Joseph in because the chief baker remembered him. After a while, he forgot about him, but he brings him back into the picture, and Joseph interprets the dreams for Pharaoh. He says they're the same, one and the same. There are 7 years of plenty that are coming upon Egypt, abundance of grain. Then following it will be 7 years of famine. And so they're like, what do we do? And he tells them a plan to preserve their lives. Store up the excess grain, put them in refineries or silos or whatever, and they will be there when food becomes scarce. So the Pharaoh says, you are a wise man, elevates him to a position of authority, probably like a prime minister at the Pharaoh's right hand. So he's given a place of leadership, and even a wife, an Egyptian wife, who has 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. We'll talk about them in a little bit. So a lot of things happening, good things for Joseph. Finally, he's getting out of all the trials, and he's elevated to a position of authority. It tells me that humility brings honor. A lot of people want to promote themselves and aspire to great things, and they don't pass these tests, and they kind of disappear from the scene. But if you go through them, recognizing, God, what are you trying to do in me and through me with all these things happening right now? And when we get through them, we get out on the other side, God promotes. So Joseph becomes a savior to the people of Egypt with this plan to create a surplus of grain. They have food, but Jacob hears about it up in Canaan. And he says to the sons, go down to Egypt and buy us a little food so that we may live and not die. Now, some time has gone by, maybe some 15 years. Joseph is not a teenager anymore. He's a man in his 30s. The sons go down there, minus Benjamin. Jacob is afraid something's going to happen to him because he lost Joseph, or so he thinks. So he holds on to Benjamin. The rest of them go down to Egypt, and they don't recognize Joseph. Why? He's got Egyptian clothing. He's speaking the language of the land, not Hebrew. He's become an Egyptian, basically, in all intents and purposes. He's got an Egyptian wife, 2 sons, and he recognizes them. And he says, you are spies. You've come down here to spy out our land and our food. And they go, no, that's not us. We're all the sons of one man. One of us is no longer, and the other, the youngest, is with our father up in Canaan. That was Joseph's inroad here to really put the screws to them and test them to see if they're still calloused or if they had been chastised by the Lord and their hearts are soft now. So what does he do? He says, I'll give you some food. They exchange money, and he keeps Simeon. You ever ask yourself, why Simeon? Scholars, commentators believe that Simeon was one of the ringleaders of getting Joseph sold to the Ishmaelites. That could possibly be true. He's singled out here. He keeps Simeon under house arrest. The rest of them go back to Jacob. And what happens is he puts the money back in their sacks, like they had ripped Joseph off. When they get up there, they realize something's wrong. All the money's in our sacks. We have the grain. And Jacob says to them a little later on, go back when the food ran out, go back and, buy some more food for us. And I think it was Judah who said, we can't go back. The man said, unless we bring our youngest son back, Benjamin, you will not see my face again. Jacob is not happy about this. He said, you're going to deny me my youngest son? And Judah, and I think Reuben as well, say, you can have my sons if we don't bring him back. So finally, long story short, they go back down into Egypt. Joseph is waiting for them, and another extreme test. Benjamin's with them this time. Joseph recognizes him. And again, same situation. They take the grain, money is put in their sacks, and also a cup, a silver cup, something like that, which, in the theft of a cup like that, in religious circles, merited the death penalty. So they go back, or they try to go back, and they're brought into captivity. And Joseph is like, he's not blaming Benjamin. Nobody's blaming Benjamin. But it seems like he's the guilty one. The cup is in his saddlebag. So they're all remorseful. They're crying, they're weeping. They feel like this is the discipline of God for what we did to our brother Joseph. Finally, Joseph lets them off the hook. He is a type of Christ in the sense that he's a man of righteousness, and he extends grace to these brothers, even that they didn't deserve it. And he reveals to them in chapter 45 who he is. He says, come near to me, I am Joseph, your brother, who came down to Egypt to save the people and yourselves. And they're all afraid. They're thinking, can't believe this. Can you imagine their faces seeing Joseph and recognizing him for the first time? And he says, God brought me here. Rather than you thought you sold me into slavery, but God sent me ahead to preserve life. Not only the life of the Egyptians, but the Israelites as well. So there can be a big reunion here. He says, go get my father, bring him down here with all the hired hands. And they do that, and they go back, first of all, and tell Jacob that Joseph is alive. He can't believe it. After all these years, he says, now I can die. I've got to go see my son Joseph, and then I can die. But he doesn't. He lives for quite a while. They come down to Egypt, and Joseph arranges for them to live in a land called Goshen, which we'll hear more about in the book of Exodus. And Joseph becomes a savior to his people. Can you imagine also, the sons now have got to tell Jacob, inform him of their misdeeds, how they sold Joseph. They didn't kill him, or the beast didn't kill him, but nothing is said or done about that. No retribution whatsoever. So Joseph gets together and he brings the clan into Goshen. The reason for that is there is no contaminating idols in the capital city here. And Egypt is preserved. That fulfills the promise to Abraham. All nations are going to come under the authority of the Israelites. Jacob wants his burial to give testimony to his faith. He talks about this in chapter 47, verses 29 and 30. He has a desire to see all his descendants return to Canaan. And that doesn't happen for hundreds of years. Then we have him being introduced to the Pharaoh. Pharaoh wants to know how old he is. Jacob blesses him. He says, my family are shepherds, which the Egyptians did not like at all. They thought that they were unclean, if you will. And so they're living in Goshen. And then Joseph brings his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Manasseh's the older one, to Jacob on his deathbed. And he says, very reminiscent of Isaac blessing Jacob and Esau. He says, would you bless them, my father? Joseph crosses his hands, puts his right hand on Ephraim, the younger, his left hand on Manasseh the older. Very similar to what happened with Jacob and Esau. He says the older will serve the younger. And that's exactly what happened. Ephraim, through these descendants, years later becomes the head of the northern tribes of what we call Israel. A couple of the other sons. Think about this. Reuben was an adulterer. He lay with Bilhah, I believe it was, Jacob's concubine. He pretty much disappears from the whole scene as a tribe. You've got Simeon and Levi, murderers who they take up the sword for their sister Dinah, who's raped, and they slew all the Shechemites, or Hamorites, I think they are, in vengeance. They're murderers. Although Levi, his descendants become the priests in Exodus chapter 32. Simeon is not given an allotment of the land like the other brothers. He receives a portion of Judah's inheritance. So these sons are going to become more prominent later on. But then we have Jacob dying in chapter 50, but not before he gives a prophetic word to all 12 of the sons. And he relates all the experiences of his life to the sovereign will of God. God led me. God revealed himself to me. God did this, God did that. He's a changed individual. He's transformed. Joseph is about 56 years old at the death of his father, and he recognizes the presence of God in his own life. He dies at 110 years old, lives a long time, and his coffin in Egypt was a promise for the future. Eventually, his bones are going to be taken up to Canaan by none other than Joshua. Long period of time is going to be in the gap there. But that's the story of how Israel becomes not just a family, but a nation. And as we see, we'll get into the book of Exodus next week. We'll start that, break that open, and we'll see how that plays out. They're in bondage to Egypt after a while. Several generations go by that don't know Joseph, but that's for another time. So I hope you enjoyed this blessing. Kind of rushed through it a little bit today. Sorry about that, but I wanted to end this so that we could start Exodus next week. All right, I think I covered just about everything here I wanted to teach on, and hope you enjoyed this. All right, God bless.